A new beginning in London. It wasn't like the fairy tales. It rained more than you'd expect, and people walked quickly with no time to look around. But Snow White did. Every morning as she stepped out of her small apartment in Greenfield, she looked up at the gray sky and told herself, "Today, something is going to change." Blanca was 24 years old and had left behind her hometown, a place called Val-de-Luz, known for its landscapes and the royal family she once belonged to. For years, she had been Princess Snow White, but here in London, she was simply Blanca. She worked part-time at a coffee shop and studied fashion design in the afternoons. Her dream was to create a clothing brand that cared for the planet and respected the people who made the clothes. A different kind of brand, one made in her own way. There wasn't much left from her past, though some things were hard to forget. Especially Selma, her stepmother, a famous businesswoman in the fashion world who had taken control of the family empire after the king's death. Selma hadn't just taken Blanca's throne. She had used her power to make Blanca invisible. But Blanca no longer thought about revenge. She just wanted to live her own story. In London, she shared her apartment with Nano, her best friend and companion since she first arrived. Nano was a tailor, quiet in appearance but incredibly talented. He was cheerful, hard-working, and the first person to believe in her. That evening, after closing the coffee shop, Blanca came home exhausted. Nano was waiting, dinner ready as always. They ate quietly for a while until he spoke. "Blanca, are you going to accept that investor's money?" he asked, straight to the point. She stared at her plate, unsure how to answer. A man had contacted her by email. He offered to invest in her first clothing line, but his last name sounded familiar. He worked for Selma. "I don't know, Nano. If I say no, I may never get started. But if I say yes, I could lose everything." He sighed, then smiled at her with that calm patience of his that always made her feel at peace. "You don't need Selma's money, or anyone from her circle. Start small. I'll help you." That night, after thinking it over for a long time, Blanca made a decision. She was going to do it her way. No shortcuts. The following weeks were difficult. Blanca and Nano spent entire days working on their designs. On the small apartment's table, threads and fabrics mixed with coffee cups and piles of paper filled with sketches. Nano worked on sewing the first samples. Blanca designed until her hands ached. They had managed to secure a spot at a design fair for young entrepreneurs. It was their first real chance to showcase their work, without the weight of her last name and without Selma's shadow looming over her. One afternoon, Blanca received a message on her phone. It was from Selma. "What a shame we're not in this together. Your new collection is very inspiring. I'm glad to see we still think alike." A chill ran through her chest. She turned on her computer and went straight to Selma's brand website. And there they were, her designs. The dresses she had created from scratch were now part of Selma Lux's new collection, being celebrated as a success in all the fashion magazines. "She stole everything!" Blanca cried out, furious. Nano came running from his room. He read the message and saw the photos. He knew exactly what had happened. Someone from Selma's team had gotten access to the sketches Blanca had submitted for the contest. It was theft, plain and simple. Blanca broke down. She cried for hours while Nano did his best to comfort her. "Don't give up now," he said gently. "We can start over. You have ideas to spare. Let's do it again. This time, even stronger." It wasn't easy to convince her, but that very night, Blanca opened a new notebook, and she started again. A month later, Blanca and Nano's booth was ready at Riverside Market. A simple table, a white canvas, and a small rack displaying the first pieces of their collection: natural linen blouses, reversible jackets, and recycled fabric bags, all handmade by them. People walked by. Some glanced over, others passed without stopping. Blanca felt invisible again, until a young woman approached. She had a curious gaze and delicate hands. She carefully looked through each item, tried on a jacket, and smiled. "Did you make this yourselves?" she asked. Blanca nodded. "It's beautiful. I'll take it." It was their first sale. Blanca couldn't help but smile. From that moment on, more people came over. Some requested custom pieces, while others simply offered their congratulations. By the end of the day, Blanca and Nano counted the first earnings of their new venture. "We're going to need more fabric," Nano said with a tired but happy smile. Shortly after, Blanca received a message from Liam, a journalist who wrote about ethical fashion. He had stopped by their booth and had been intrigued by Blanca's story. "Are you Selma's daughter?" he asked during the interview. She hesitated. She didn't want to talk about her past, but she understood that this truth was part of her journey. "I'm Blanca Snow," she replied firmly, "and I'm creating something of my own." Liam published the interview on his blog. Within days, the story went viral. Orders started pouring in from all over London, but threats followed too. Selma wasn't going to stand by and do nothing. Even so, Blanca didn't stop. Nano was always by her side, and Liam became a new ally. 1 week later, Blanca received a letter. It was an invitation to participate in the most important sustainable fashion show in Europe, in Paris. "We're going to Paris," she said, looking at Nano with a mix of fear and hope. He simply nodded. Time to make dreams come true. The city of Paris welcomed her with clear skies, something rare for the month of October. Blanca took it as a sign. She traveled light, but carried a heart full of dreams. Nano was by her side, carefully carrying the trunk that held the garments of the new collection they had worked on for weeks. The Green Runway Paris was the most important event of the year in the world of sustainable fashion. Designers from all over the world were participating. As they arrived at the venue, Blanca felt the weight of her nerves, but also a deep, steady calm. She was exactly where she had always dreamed of being. The place was breathtaking. An old building, beautifully restored, with stone walls and enormous windows letting in streams of natural light. There were models, photographers, and journalists everywhere. Blanca adjusted each piece over and over, while Nano checked every last detail of the wardrobe. "Relax," he said softly. "It's perfect." Blanca took a deep breath. Liam had promised he'd be sitting in the front row. She didn't say it out loud, but knowing he was there brought her comfort. An assistant approached and handed her the lineup. Her collection would be the last to walk. She would close the show. "That's an honor," Nano said, smiling. "This is your moment." Backstage, Blanca looked at her designs one last time. Every seam, every button, every detail told her story. This wasn't just fashion. It was the reflection of her journey, the courage it had taken to become herself. Then she saw her, Selma, standing at the far end of the room, elegant as always, surrounded by photographers and powerful people. Their eyes met. Selma gave her a cold, polished smile. But Blanca no longer felt fear, only determination. The show began. One by one, the models walked the runway, showcasing the designs Blanca and Nano had created. Simple garments made from recycled fabrics, each one embroidered by hand with words on the inside. Strength, freedom, truth. Each piece was named after someone important in Blanca's life. Her mother, Nano, even the clients who had believed in her back in London. At first, the audience was silent. Then came the murmurs, the nods of approval. By the time the last model made her final turn, Blanca felt the knot in her throat finally release. When the show ended, the applause was clear and strong. Liam stood up and clapped without hesitation. Nano took Blanca's hand and squeezed it tightly. Hours later, at the reception after the event, designers, buyers, and journalists approached her. Everyone wanted to meet her. They offered contracts, collaborations, and new opportunities for her brand. Selma kept her distance for a while, but eventually, she walked over. She wore an immaculate white coat and dark sunglasses that did little to hide her sharp gaze. "Congratulations, Blanca," she said coolly. "I never thought you'd make it this far without me." Blanca took a deep breath before replying. "I never needed you," she said softly. "I only needed to believe in myself." Selma stared at her for a moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Blanca felt something inside her finally close. For good, no anger, just peace. That night, in the small apartment they had rented in Paris, Nano and Blanca toasted with apple juice. "So, what now?" Nano asked. Blanca smiled. "Now we keep creating, but this time, we go big." A message came through confirming what they had dared to dream. Their brand, Nieves Libre, had been selected for the next Sustainable Fashion Week in New York. Blanca looked at Nano and Liam, who had joined them later that evening. Both had been part of her journey in ways she would never forget. And for the first time